Crime Cafe, your podcasting source of great crime, suspense, and thriller writing. I'm your host, Debbi Mack. Before I bring on my guest, I'd like to remind you that the Crime Cafe 9-book set and Crime Cafe short story anthology are available for sale on my website, debbimack.com, debbimack.com, and just click on Crime Cafe, and you'll get to the buy links as well as the podcast subscribe buttons and the merchandise store. Now, having said that, I'm very pleased to have today with me mystery author Curtis Bausse. Did I say that correctly?
Well, should be Bausse normally.
Bausse.
More the French pronunciation.
Bausse. Curtis Bausse.
I accept anything these days, you know. So.
But you go by Curtis, I assume.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Curtis, who comes to us from Provence. Am I saying that right?
That's perfect, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it's great to have you on. And you are originally from Wales, though.
Indeed, yes.
That's awesome.
Wales. Grew up in Wales, educated in England, and then I moved to France ages ago. Shall we just say ages ago?
Ages ago.
Yeah.
So you lived in Wales for a while. Yes, go ahead.
I lived in Wales all my childhood and then went to school in England. I'm pretty much Welsh. It's kind of 75%. But we lived very close to the border with England. And I never learned to speak Welsh, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand Welsh. So my education is more English. And then I moved to France. So I'm a bit of a mix, yeah.
Okay, well, I just have to ask, have you ever been to Port Myron?
In Wales?
In Wales.
Yes, a long time ago. Well, why do you have to ask that? Have you been?
I have to ask that because I'm a huge fan of the TV show that was set there, The Prisoner.
Yeah.
Whenever I see that place, I always think creepy small town.
Right. Yeah. No, I went when I was a kid, and that series was amazing. And I think afterwards it actually burnt down. Did it? Did you read about that? Or?
I didn't read about that. No.
There was a fire there in Port Myron, and I think the whole kind of set that they used burned down. Whether they've rebuilt it, I don't know. But there was a fire there.
Wow. Because I know that there was quite an uproar after they aired the ending of the series.
Yeah.
To the point where Patrick McGoohan actually fled the country, as I understand it.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, so in common then.
I love that show, though. So what inspired you to move to France?
What inspired me? Well, my parents were always Francophiles. We came to France when I was a kid for holidays. From the age of like 8 or 10 onwards, you know, we would come to France every year. I studied French at uni, and I had a what we call a sandwich year abroad when you study languages. So I came to France during that year at university, and more or less fell in love with the country. Well, I was already pretty much, and met my wife, and at that time,
Mm-hmm.
And so settled there. As soon as I left uni, in fact, Britain at that time, the UK was not in a very great state. This is kind of the mid-70s, more or less bankrupt, and there wasn't much that would, want you to stay in Britain. So, and France was a very attractive proposition at that time. So I came and settled and stayed ever since. Yeah.
Huh. And where did you get the idea to write about Magali in your mysteries?
You mean where did I find her as a particular the
What
protagonist,
inspired that character?
the main
Yes.
character. Well, actually, she lived just down the road from here, sort of 500 yards down the road. Um, that was the person that inspired me, if you like, the initial spark, because I like to have something from reality to kind of set me off. And we knew her as a neighbor. She'd just been left by her husband after like 25 or 26 years of marriage. And I thought, well, you know, we discussed it with her, what she's going to do and everything. Eventually she moved on, and we no longer have any contact with her. But I took that situation and transposed it into Magali. And that joined up with something, a kind of fantasy I had kind of a long time ago, was to be a private detective. And at that time in France, I don't think it's the same in the States, but at that time in France, it was not regulated at all. You could just put up a plaque and say, I'm a private detective, come, you know, I'll solve your cases. Since then, it has been regulated in France about a dozen years ago, not more recent, no later than that, you know. That was what sparked it off, you know, that idea of someone looking for a new life, and they could just put up a plaque and say they're a private detective. Obviously, she was illegal doing that at this time, but, you know, it hadn't been very long since it was illegal. And so she had to go through the process of becoming qualified and so forth. But that was what gave me the idea of using Magali as a protagonist. Yeah.
Well, I like it a lot. I love your sense of humor. Would you describe your series as humorous mystery? Do you fall kind of like more on the cozy side of the spectrum, or more, does it get grittier, or how would you describe it?
Actually, it gets kind of darker. The further I go, it gets a bit darker. I'm not particularly. I don't know a lot about mystery series in general. I mean, I do read them, but I read loads of other stuff. And all the various subgenres was something I actually discovered as I was going along. So cozy mystery, procedurals, and all that. And when I set out, it was just kind of, I'm going to write a detective story, a mystery story. And I wouldn't call it cozy. It's a little bit of everything, really. Not in a particular subgenre. And as I go along, it's getting more and more dark, in fact. So I wouldn't call it cozy, even if I do try to keep the humor in there. Yeah.
Well, I like that, actually. I like the
Yeah.
idea of
Oh, yeah. I
incorporating
think
so
that's
many
important.
different types of literature and elements in there.
I find it difficult to let go of humor entirely, you know.
Good. Tell us about your latest book in the series, then.
The latest, well, the one I'm working on now, you mean, or the one?
The one that's currently out that you're giving away.
Okay. Because, yeah, the first one was One Green Bottle, which you started reading perhaps. And then the other one is Perfume Island, the second one. That's the one that was set in Mayotte, which is a tiny island in the Indian Ocean, a French island, which is the latest, the most recent department of France. So a fully integrated part of France, but 5,000 miles away from Paris, where we went to live, my wife and I, just a few years ago. We spent 2 years there. My wife was a school inspector before, she's just now retired. And I had just retired at that time. And so she had a post out in Mayotte for 2 years. And so we went out there. And it's quite an exceptional place. I mean, there are a lot of places in the world which have inequality, obviously, you know, a lot of rich people, the rich and poor living together, and the rich in protected communities and so forth. But this island is quite special insofar as it's only recently become a French department, which goes against, if you like, the whole idea of decolonization, the whole trend since the 1950s of you know, African countries getting their independence. And Mayotte was in the mid-70s part of a French colony, the Comoros Islands, and they voted to whether they wanted to become independent or not. And they're composed of 4 islands. 3 of the islands voted to become independent, and Mayotte was the only one that said, no, we don't want to be independent. We want to remain French. Under international law, the majority vote would be the valid one. In other words, the whole country becomes independent. But France said, okay, well, 3 of the islands have voted to become independent, so yeah, you can become independent. But we're going to keep the 4th one because they voted to remain French. That's more or less how it happened. And so the 3 Comorian islands now say, well, that's completely illegal. And there had been actually several resolutions in the United Nations to say that France is occupying Mayotte illegally. But the French don't really care about that. And, you know, the United Nations are not going to do anything. So that's the situation as it is now. And little by little, Mayotte has become fully integrated into France. Now it's a fully French department, except that it's 95% Muslim. The main language, the first language, is not French. A minority of people speak French. And you get a lot of immigrants now coming from the other 3 islands to try and live in Mayotte, because Mayotte is part of Europe, being part of France, and so they expect a better lifestyle, a better standard of living. They want eventually to acquire French nationality and maybe make it to Europe, etc. So you have all the problems of migration that we get in Europe on a slightly smaller scale, but in Mayotte we get those, and they cross from Comoros. It's about 70 kilometers. It's a risky crossing. There's been about 20,000 people who've lost their lives in the last 20 years or so. And that's where we went to live for 2 years. It's a fabulous island, extremely beautiful. It has a lagoon, which is said to be the 2nd most beautiful and largest lagoon in the world. And yet there is this undercurrent and a very exceptional political situation, which gave rise to the 2nd novel.
Wow. Sounds like quite a bit of interesting background goes into that story.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's a fascinating place, which I, you know, tried to convey in the novel without laying it on too thick. But I think
in a way that's entertaining yet at the same time informs.
Right. Mix it up in the story, and yeah.
And it's probably a situation that a lot of people where I live don't know about. So yes. It sounds fascinating.
Even in France, there aren't that many people that do know. I mean, they've heard of Mayotte because they know that it's part of France. But if you ask them to say where it is, they wouldn't really know. You know, it's off the radar.
And, oh my gosh!
It's a bit of a flashpoint.
Interesting, very interesting. Who Who are the authors who have most inspired you and your writing?
Wow.
That's a tough one, I know, but
You
what
didn't warn me about that one.
I didn't warn you, no, but
I've had loads of people that have inspired me, inspired me, that I've just adored uh,
yes.
as a reader, ever since I was a kid. And I guess if you're looking at crime writing, it would have to go back to Agatha Christie,
Mm-hmm.
as a child. Um, she was the person that really opened to me what it meant to write a mystery which would bamboozle the reader. And I suppose I still have that, her in my mind when I write somehow sort of the whodunit. Nowadays, I don't know, but they're not mystery writers. I adore Haruki Murakami, the Japanese writer, but that's more stylistic and, well, it's mysterious, but he doesn't write mystery novels. So yeah.
But he writes extraordinary stuff.
Exactly, yeah, yeah.
Where do you see the series going from here?
Where's it going?
Yeah, in terms of like story arc for
Well,
Magali? Is it
yeah,
Magali?
Magali.
Magali.
Yeah, she's the third one. I'm in the middle of writing the third one. As I
Yes.
said, it gets a little bit darker, um, while at the same time trying, keeping those elements of humor. There's a relationship with Charlotte Perle, whose son is murdered in the first one. She's the first person who comes to Magali and says, I want you to find the person who killed my son. And in the second one, Perfume Island, they are there together, and that's where the mystery starts. And Charlotte is actually at one point accused of being a killer there. And in the third one, they get back together again. And so I'm in the middle of writing that. I don't want to say too much about it because I'm in kind of the second or third draft, but it's now working out, I think, okay. It's going to be slightly different from the first two insofar as there are multiple points of view in the third one. And it's slightly more towards the thriller end, or at least it's a blend of mystery and thriller. The others were, well, I think especially Perfume Island was very much a whodunit. When I spoke about Agatha Christie, it was kind of more that end of things. Whereas the one I'm on now is blends the thriller and mystery.
That's excellent. That sounds really great. I have to tell you, the opening chapter in your first one just grabbed me by the lapels.
Oh, good, good.
Truly, truly.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm loving it.
I'm very glad about that. I think you'll even, I even prefer the opening chapter in Perfume Island, the second one, which is, I think, even better. But I'm very glad you like the first one. Yeah, great.
Oh, yes. I can't wait to finish it so I can get on to the second one now.
Okay, lovely.
Let me see. If you could pick anybody to play Magali in, say, a television or movie adaptation of your books, who would you pick?
Oh,
Didn't warn you on that one either.
Yeah, that presupposes that I know a lot of actresses. And,
Well,
yeah.
if you can think of anybody at all, you don't have to think of a lot.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a huge A-list star.
An actress that appeared in a film called The Constant Gardener, which was taken from a book by John le Carré. I thought it was her, but maybe I'm not very good I love movies,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not very good at remembering the names of actors and actresses and so forth, which is probably
And
all to their credit because they play the characters, and I afterwards I just forget who the names of the actors are. Um, I think
that
that's how it should be,
it's
but
funny. I have the same problem. I can never remember actor names
yeah,
these
and I
days.
don't follow, I don't read about them, or I don't follow that. So I'm sorry, I probably got the name wrong, but there's an actress. Yeah, I've definitely got an image of her face, but I just can't put the name of it on it. Yeah.
Well, look up The Constant Gardener, and she's in that
Yes, yes.
in a lead role.
Well, yeah, there were definitely there was a kind of a pair, and
Okay,
yeah,
all right, Constant Gardener.
yeah.
Um, is there anything else you'd like to add before we finish up?
Can't think of anything except to thank you for your commitment to the whole writing business, and crime writing especially, and B, for having me on the podcast.
Well, it was my pleasure, and I thank you for being here. It's fantastic. Thanks.
You're welcome. I'm glad to have been here. Okay.
And so I will just remind everybody to please enter Curtis's giveaway.
All
You can
right.
enter by going to his website and going to the contact page. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Just enter the name. Well, just say give away your name, and that's it. And I will have the address, and so I'll put everybody into a draw. And as you mentioned, the prize is Perfume Island,
Mm-hmm.
plus the box of candies. Yeah, the Calisson Dex. So.
Yeah, candy. That's excellent. And you have until January 23rd to get in on the giveaway. So do that. And don't forget that you can buy the Crime Cafe publications on my website, debbimack.com. Thanks again for being here, Curtis. And until next time, happy reading, everybody.